Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And we are excited to have you here, but we'll just wait for a couple of more minutes to allow everyone to join in. And I hope I'm audible to all of you as well. And in the meantime, as we are waiting, I would love to do a quick sense of the energy in the room. How excited are you for today's session? Because I'm quite excited. And I would like to know the emotions from your end as well. Feel free to use the React option that will be available either on the top or the bottom bar of your screens. We would love to know that. It's wonderful to see an enthusiastic audience today. And I would encourage all of you to keep the same level of energy and engagement throughout the session. And with that, I think we are all set to start our session. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our attendees joining us today from across the different time zones. And before we start, I want to share a few quick guidelines for our audience. Your microphones and videos will be turned off to avoid any background noise and distraction during the session. And we encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A section that you can find either again on the top or bottom of your screens. We'll try to address as many questions as possible during the session, but in case we miss some questions or you wish to have any further discussion, please feel free to reach us out via the Zifo website or mail IDs we have posted in the chat. I must inform this session would be recorded and available on the Zifo's social media pages. We are delighted to have you all here to discuss a highly relevant and trending topic these days: change management strategies, elevating digital transformation in pharma. I would like to begin our discussion with a thought provoking idea. In an era where AI is accelerating our science, we are here to discuss the one thing that cannot be automated: the culture and mindset of our people. Throughout today's session, you can expect to explore strategic approaches to manage change, proven frameworks that drive structured transformation, and real world case studies that highlight what success looks like in practice. All of this with one goal in mind: to enable smooth, sustainable, and successful adoption of change within the pharma landscape. Next, I would welcome all of you to join me to introduce our speakers for the day, starting with Shari Bigford, who blends nearly 2 decades of scientific expertise with a passion for change leadership. She specializes in guiding organizations through transformation by aligning science, technology, and people, ensuring the change is not just implemented but truly adopted. Welcome, Shari.
Thank you, Shivani. I'm really excited to share with everyone today some of the experiences that I've had, both working within pharma and biotech, as well as now that I've come to Zifo and working with a number of different change initiatives and projects. So thank you. I'm excited for today's discussion.
Happy to have you here. We have another speaker with us, Harsha Nirmal Kumar, a change practitioner who brings a people first lens to digital transformation. With deep expertise in data governance and adoption, he focuses on enabling sustainable change through strong stakeholder engagement, clear communication, and accountable processes. Welcome, Harsha.
Thank you, Shivani. Happy to be here discussing something that matters most in current scenarios.
It was a pleasure to introduce you both, and I'm eagerly looking forward to this conversation. And finally, hello everyone. My name is Shivani Bora. I'm the host and facilitator for today's session. By hearing or thinking about change management, the first thing that comes to my mind is a powerful analogy. Imagine a Mount Everest expedition. Sounds dreamy, right? But it's a perfect metaphor for a journey in digital transformation in pharma, where the goal is clear, of course, the peak. But the success of that mission does not depend only on the climb itself. Rather, it depends entirely on the preparation that has happened on the base camp. Whether it is about planning the route or having the necessary items with you, or even preparing or motivating our teams. Everything begins before the actual trek starts. So, with that thought out, I would love to hear from our speakers what does they think about change management.
Yeah, so I love this analogy because I think that this really it highlights how many different elements go into a change in the same way that when you think about doing a hike to Mount Everest, right? You don't simply wake up one morning and decide that you're going to hike all the way to there. There's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of planning, there's a whole team element to it that goes into it. And the same can be said for significant transformations that are happening where you really need to bring people together, you need to have a plan, and you need to be able to adjust on the fly. So we'll definitely be pulling some of these threads through as we're talking through the different topics today. But Harsha, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
No, I love the analogy as well. I think it is critical that we are discussing this today, specifically because one of the outcomes from the recent scientific informatics experience exchange that Zifo conducted was around change management and the need for activities to change the culture amongst people, to remove it as a barrier for digital transformation in pharma. So I think it is highly critical that we are discussing this today. Uh, let's see how things pan out.
Thank you for sharing those perspectives. And the analogy clearly shows, right, that importance of having a strong and a well-defined goal. It sets direction. And at the same time, it's equally important to be well prepared for the journey needed to reach that goal. And with that thought, I would start with our audience by hearing their and hearing their thoughts or and understanding their perspective on a topic by a quick engaging poll question, which will be up on their screens. And they have almost 1 minute, and I've started the timer. Please input your answers. 30 more seconds. For the poll answers. And
Mhm.
Harsha, would you like to
Yeah,
address?
I think our audience have gone more towards reinforcing the bigger picture around macro vision. But I also see quite a lot of people who have answered about strengthening the governance, right? So but these two talk more or less about the macro vision. Completely understand that macro vision is one of the critical things for everyone to be on the same page. uh, I'll start this off with a example of a client that I worked with when I started my career. So there was this client. where each and every step of the process, almost everyone in the organization was kept informed of, and the macro vision or the organizational goals were iterated and reiterated. From the outside, we felt that people were getting informed and almost everyone was on the same page, right? But once we started working with them, what we felt was people, there were three different groups of people. So the first group, you had people who understood what was being asked of them, who had the understanding of where the expectations were going towards. And then you had a second group of people who understood the who listened to the vision and had their own understanding, right? And a third group who were confused because they neither knew what to do, and they also did not know whom to reach out to get all these things done. So just iterating and reiterating the bigger picture will alone not give the solution. You need to handhold people, take them along. It's like the analogy of the Everest expedition that we started out with. Everyone knows that the macro vision or the end goal is to reach the summit of the Mount Everest, but we also need to keep track of the micro execution part, where we say these are the activities that we are going to do, these are the things that we need to pack up, right? So macro vision alone is not going to help. uh, Again, in micro execution, you could have people, you can handhold people, take them forward with you. uh, Another use case that comes to my mind is of another client that I recently worked with, where we were working with three, four different groups, and in one of the groups, we spent a lot of time with one of the groups, giving them all the information, keeping them informed of things. And what probably happened was we started building out something, and for the particular group, the systems that they use, the processes that they were following became highly efficient, but we did not spend a lot of time with the other groups. We were able to quickly correct it, but our learnings that we got was that you build out highly effective silos when you work with particular groups. So you need to take everyone forward. You need to have the macro vision to take everyone forward, but you also need to focus on the micro execution part, because you need to take guide people who need the guidance, and you need to assist those who need assistance, and others are going to be there who are just going to come along with you because they are enthusiastic enough, and they have that knowledge and capacity to come along with you. So it's kind of a balanced approach that you need to take. You need to balance macro vision with micro execution. You cannot go with either of them. Now the question may arise, what would happen if I go with either just one of them? So to simply put it, I would say you would have resistance when you start out by giving the macro vision to the group, and there is confusion. People are going to feel that there is no clarity, and that is going to cause frustration. And when you're micro executing things on a very good place, there may be a case where the other groups are not going to feel happy because you are handholding one particular team and taking things forward. So you need to balance both to make sure that there is no resistance. uh, it's always a trade-off, and things are going to be different for almost all the different cases that you deal with. That's no one approach that you can probably take to say this is how you manage these two things with people, because people and perspectives are always going to be changing. That is why you have change management here. Shari, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I really like that first example that you gave where you have the microvision, sorry, the macrovision, and you kept reiterating it. And there were three groups, and each one perceived it differently. And so to me, that comes back to the whole having a balance. Because exactly as you said, Harsha, you can't do the same thing for every single group. You kind of have to read the room. You need to figure out where some groups may need to have that clarity or that anchor. And then where other teams, they may know what that anchor is, but they don't know where they're going, right? They don't know what the individual steps are, and you need to support them in that. So it really is about going in and understanding each group individually and trying to figure out the best way to support them as they're working towards their goal. But Shivani, I don't know if you have any other ideas.
I wanted to share that it was so amazing to listen to your experiences, and this gave me actually this idea that how important it is to focus on the bigger goals while also addressing the more granular friction points along the way. And this also brings me up with a common challenge that many or pharma organization would be facing during transformation, like what happens when some individuals or groups resist or refuse to adopt the change, how that can be effectively managed. And before we address and talk about this topic in a little deeper, I would again turn back to my audience via an interactive poll question. Give you a minute. 5 minutes. 30 more seconds. Yes. Sharon, would you like to address the responses?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. In the version of this that we did yesterday, we got very similar breakdown of the responses, where the focus groups is really where everyone gravitates towards, and I think that that can be a really powerful tool. At one of the companies that I worked at before, we were doing a fairly substantial change. And as we were going through, we had some groups who were super eager to get into it. They wanted to see what the new features were, and they really wanted to engage with us. And then there was one team who just wanted nothing to do with it. They were like, stay away from us. We have something that works. We're good. And so we looked at it and we're like, but this has all of these other things you could use. And so what we ended up doing was having a focus group with them and really digging in, because resistance can come from so many different places. It can come from insecurity. I'm really good at the old system, and if you make me change, then maybe I won't have the same value or same perceived value. It could be they have certain capabilities that they feel that they're going to lose and they don't know how they're going to replace that. Can be any number of things. With this particular example, what we found was that this team, in going through a previous software transition, had not gotten the help and support they needed. They ended up having to create workarounds that had never been resolved years later. And so they looked at this and said, you're setting us up for failure again. And so what that enabled us as a team to do was to make sure that we put the right framework and structures and support in place for them so that we could bring them along on the journey with us and they didn't feel left behind in the way that they had been in the past. I noticed a bunch of other folks responded around peer champions. I love this one. And this is one that I think, regardless of the size of a change, regardless of what it is you're doing, this is such a powerful tool. Again, another company that I had worked at, we were taking 7 different applications and consolidating down to 1. So huge amount of change, and it was across all different functional areas. What we did was we worked with leadership and we worked within each of the functional groups. We identified a change champion. And in that visual that Shivani had at the beginning, those change champions are on the path with the other hikers, right? They are there, they are in it. They understand the organization, they understand the science, they understand the workflows, and they're able to take all of that and be alongside the other people who are also going through this change. So it can be a huge advantage to a project team to have those advocates that are on the journey with the team and then also with the other users. So this is something that can really help their peers to overcome some of the concerns that they have. They're there to answer the questions and also help to put that bigger picture in perspective. The third one, I noticed there weren't a ton of people that selected the clarifying the vision and scope. And this is one, when you first look at it, it may look like you're taking the big picture and you're just hammering it. Somebody says, I don't want to do it. Nope, this is what we're doing, right? And you just are saying the same thing over and over. But the way that I think about this is actually from a recent example that I have with a client I've been working with, where at the start of the project, we sat down with leadership and we said, tell us what it is that you want this project to be. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Because it's never, I want to change this software. Why? What's the driver? It's incredibly disruptive. So you're going to want to understand what's underneath that. In addition, it allows you to establish the metrics of success, how you know you have succeeded. Because again, it's generally not, I have implemented this software. There are other things underneath. It could be more efficiency. It could be better, more fair data, more AI-ready data. Could be licenses are expiring and maybe something's going out of support, whatever it is. But in the case of this particular client, what we did, we defined this at the beginning. And then we got to a group who said, stay away from us, we're good. And we did a deeper dive. And what we found was that they had very complex processes. They collaborated across multiple groups. They had a lot of different functionality that was embedded within the legacy system. We went in and we looked and dissected what they had and compared it to the project vision. And what we did is we actually were able to establish which of the things that they did fell within scope and which of those things were actually out of scope. And we took them and we removed them from the remit of what it is we were trying to accomplish and parked it for another initiative. So what this can mean, or what this can do, is allow you to really crystallize what it is you're trying to accomplish and what that means to all the different parts of the organization. That team then said, okay, now we're good because we know you're touching this part, but you're not touching this part. So that can be another really powerful tool to be able to help you bring people along on the journey. But Harsha, I don't know if you have any other ideas.
Uh, I have some interesting experience with peer champions. So in one of the first few clients that I worked with, I started out in implementation. So we were trying to make people adopt a new system and change how things were configured. Uh, right. So what we started to see was there was resistance with them, and we tried a lot of things. Things nothing seemed to work out. So at last, what we did, we set up a meeting where the people who are getting affected by the work that was meant to be changed were introduced to the people who are actually doing the work. And upon meeting these people, the lab scientists who were actually doing the work became more empathetic. They became more open to change. They said, okay, my work is affecting someone in a negative way. I can do this change, right? The same people who maybe a few hours ago said that they were not open to doing it, they came forward and they said, we'll go ahead and do the change because I know that I'm affecting someone. So being empathetic is part of the job. So making people meet, having that connection with your peers actually helps uh, move change forward, is my understanding as well.
And after listening to both of you, I got this understanding that it seems like the resistance looks like a very natural response to anything that is unfamiliar or unknown. And instead of addressing the change from a technical standpoint every time, as you have mentioned, like it would be better to look from the emotional and cultural lens as well. And I believe that this would definitely assist change leaders to get more clarity and alignment to the root cause of resistance, as in the examples you both have quoted. And with that, there is another question that arises, that on the roles or and the actions of the leadership that can play here to build more trust and understanding so that it drives a smoother transformation process and enhance the adoption rate as well. But again, if to dive into that topic a little bit more deeper, first we should run through one poll question that for our audience to check their understanding. Must be up, and I'll start the timer of 1 minute. Thirty seconds. The time is up. Harsha, would you like to address the responses?
Yeah, I think the audience have predominantly chosen strength and change and communication plan. This ties back to policies, right? So that and the create a structured training plan ties back to governance or policies, whereas the operationalization part of things would tie to the improving training and adding incentives for people to probably adopt these changes. Uh, I see that there are a lot of confusion with how things are communicated. So it is always better to have a plan or a template. So starting with governance and operationalization, I would say it is more about people and policies. So people are required to operationalize the policies, which are essentially governance documents, right? So I would say it is and not versus. So you need both people and policies. And these policies are probably going to have the roles and responsibilities that are going to be christened upon the different people who are going to take up these roles, right? Uh, Talking about this, I fondly remember a client where we were introduced in between one of the implementations that was already going on. And there was this case where we found a few people who were enthusiastic enough to lead change. They were coordinating with a lot of users. They'd been spending a lot of their time helping others. And as time went by, we started noticing that the pace at which that they were doing the work started to slow down. Fortunately, the management also noticed this, and they wanted to do a root cause analysis. And there were a few outcomes of this. The first one was they started identifying that whoever was leading this was starting to feel burdened because they had their own job, and the change management or communicating and coordinating with others was probably an additional work that that person was probably doing for the betterment of the organization. And the other thing was there was no set process. So they wanted to set a process, so they started working on the R&R documents. Then they came up with a governance charter wherein they said we are going to form a governance council, which is going to be which is going to have all these people as part of it, probably the lab leads or the functional leads, who are going to triage all the requests that is going to come in from across the organization. So this they documented it, and a good thing that they did was they operationalized it as well. They called it the governance council. They what they did was you had this group of people meeting every week for around an hour or so, discussing the different requests that came in from the end users. Once they received the users, they did the analysis and they said, okay, this has to happen, this does not have to happen, there is already something that is going on. And why this became important was someone was there triaging, and they knew that they had a backup. They knew this was a process that needed to happen, and they also knew what would happen if the process was not followed. The beautiful thing was they were also open to improvising the process that they had in hand. So it went hand in hand, and almost all of their issues got sorted in probably say 6 months or 7 months during the course of the implementation. So it was very we were very happy to see it happen in real life. uh, what we learned was you need to have policies or documents which are not barriers. In most places, people get frightened when they hear the words policies, adherence, compliance, predominantly because people feel that these are going to be barriers to the work that they're going to do, that they are performing. So we feel that these should be guardrails that guide people. You should be able to improvise them and improve them. They should not impede your progress. And you also need to make sure that you need to adhere to it. So there is going to be a human component to it, who is going to say, the person is going to say if this is acceptable or not. You cannot always keep changing things as well, right? And you need to have both operationalization as well as governance. It's a day-to-day activity. Again, you cannot expect anyone to do it or pull this off in one day or 1 week or 1 month. It has to be a cultural thing that people adopt naturally. You cannot push it down their work, because end of the day you do not want people to be burdened. You do not want them to be overworked, because it is them that who is going to take the organization forward, and policies are just going to be there. You need policies because you need to help people identify who their backups are, what the process is, what they can fall back to, how much they can stretch. So it is really critical that we have both operationalization and governance go hand in hand. Again, this also ties back to the peer champions that Shari was talking about. When you have a good network of people, when you have a good network of people who are your change champions, they're going to drive that change organically. They are not going to want others to do it, right? They're going to take that initiative upon themselves. So it is critical that we develop all these additional things uh, in addition to whatever documents or operationalization that we are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple pieces to key in on there. The first is that your change champions, the people who are actually helping and facilitating, typically have a day job. And exactly as you said, Harsha, excuse me, if you don't have enough of a framework in place, something for them to be aware and comfortable with where backups can come from, how else things can play in, you could very often end up in a situation where they're burned out. Change fatigue comes in. This becomes a much more challenging environment as a whole, not just with that one person, but it can really turn the tide of a project if you don't have the right supports and the right guidance in place. The other thing that I liked the way you talked about it is that the frameworks need to be flexible. And I think of it as when you're going up the mountain, right? You have a path, you're following the trail, you've got your trail markers. And last night there was an avalanche and it blocked off this part of the path, right? If you shut down, I've got nothing, right? Then it really makes that path so much more challenging. You need to be quick on your feet and you need to be able to adapt and say, well, I have my compass and I know generally where I'm headed, and be able to make those changes and really be able to work with the situation that you find yourself in, because it will constantly evolve. But Shivani, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
I found it very interesting the way you have explained the concept. I really like the way you highlighted on how having a clear protocol helps answer the critical questions of when and who is responsible. And all these questions are actually needed to set the rules to ensure that the change plan is not diverting from the direction and it has remained structured, but at the same time focusing and emphasizing upon addressing the what and how of the change plan when we talk about operationalization. That also I think equally important in order to ensure that the change is effectively included into the daily practices. But building on this, wouldn't it be interesting to explore the tools or the templates or the mechanisms that would simplify this process, especially in order to identify the constraints or the barriers that actually prevent people from transitioning smoothly? But before our speakers share their insights, I would again ask our audience to share their understanding via a quick, engaging poll question. It will be up on your screen, and I'll start the timer for a minute. 30 more seconds. The time is up, and we got responses. Shari, would you like to address them?
All right. Well, I will start with the vision and values. That does seem to be where the majority of our participants here were sharing their ideas. So I think I mentioned earlier in one of the other examples that we started off with a workshop to understand the foundation of what a project is trying to accomplish. This is something that is super helpful as you're going into a change because it really allows you to set the boundaries, set the framework for what it is you're trying to accomplish. This, as part of this, you can define a mission statement, a vision statement, you can define how it is that you want to work together, highlighting the particular elements of project execution that are most important. In some cases, that may mean that the project works as efficiently as possible and you get to the end quickly. It may mean that you're only hitting a minimum viable product. So just the bare bones of what it is you want to accomplish, or it could be that you want the solution to have all the bells and whistles, have all of the detail, and that's really what's important to you. It's going through and identifying that at the beginning. Additionally, what I have done when I've done this, both with one of my clients as well as when I was working in an earlier company, is that we identified the metrics of success. So we had a client who came to us maybe a year ago who they started the conversation by saying, we had this super successful project. It did all the technical things, but nobody's using it. And it made us work with them and take a step back and say, well, was the project actually successful then? How do you define success? Because it's typically not, we have the best technical solution. It's typically, you've enabled your users to streamline the work that they're doing, or to make their data more fair, or to enable better collaboration, whatever it is. And then going through and saying, how do you measure that? If you expect better collaboration, are you seeing that you have experiments where you have multiple contributors across departments? Whatever it is, you go through and you can identify that at the start so that when you get to the end, then you can say, did we accomplish this? Did we do what it is that we set out to do? So I see this as a really powerful tool as you're going into these large transformative projects. The other two, I noticed we had sort of an equal split between the others. So stakeholder mapping, this is an important one where, again, regardless of where you are within the scope of a project, you want to know where everybody falls. So what I mean by that is you look at it across typically two axes. One is how much buy-in do they need? How much information do they need? And how much influence do they have? Because you can have really influential people who maybe don't need all the details, but they do have the potential to really have a significant impact in terms of engagement of your users, in terms of ability to drive towards where it is you want the project to go. Similarly, you may have end users who don't have a ton of influence, but at the same time, you really need to buy in. They need to have all of the details. And so what you can do in setting up and figuring out where people fit in this quadrant is set up the right forums, the right communication pathways, the right discussion areas where you can make sure you are bringing people along on the journey to the degree that they need to be. For folks who maybe don't have a lot of influence, don't need to know a lot of details, but they should know something, you can send a newsletter and just let them know some of the details occasionally, as opposed to others who may need a lot of details, may have a lot of influence. You're going to want to check in with them and have discussions and conversations on a regular basis. So it's figuring all of that out from the beginning so that you can make sure, again, you're putting the right foundations in place to better enable success. The third one, the communicate, demonstrate, validate. This is an important one when you're thinking about leadership. A lot of times, leaders, they come up with a big picture. We're going to change our ELN, right? Okay, how can I support that? Right? You know, they have a lot of influence, but they aren't in the day-to-day. What they can do, if you work with them through this CDV document where you help them, these are the types of information, these are the forums where it's important for you to communicate this. Me, from a project team, saying, this is going to really help your workflow, or it's really important for you to put these metadata tags, is not going to carry the same weight as the head of your department, as the president of the organization, right? They're going to carry a lot more weight in terms of what they say is important. So it's helping them. And I've had a previous company that I worked at, we wrote the email and we sent it to the leader. She put her own flavor to it and she sent it out signed with her name so that it really did come from leadership. It was her message, but we coached her in terms of what this would do in terms of the final outcome of the project. Same thing with demonstrating. What activities do they need to demonstrate as well as validate? So validate is an important one. Going back to the previous topic where Harsha was talking about having those change champions, having those people who are putting in above and beyond their day job to help carry these projects forward. A lot of times this work goes unrecognized. You want that to be validated. You want that to be acknowledged, not brushed aside or ignored. Sometimes people even feel punished because they aren't driving towards the next latest, greatest target 100% of their time, maybe only 90% of the time, because they're taking 10% to help bring everyone else along, which ultimately does help the company, just maybe not in the same way. So it's helping, giving shout outs, maybe giving specific points or some other way of recognizing and validating the work that's happening there. Again, there are a whole lot of other tools that can be used, but these are some of the key ones that I've seen have some strong impact with some of the projects that I've worked on. But Harsha, I welcome any other thoughts you have.
So I think this also ties back to two of the documents that we had as options in the previous poll, if I'm not wrong, something about communication plan, training plan, and change management plans. Again, when you have a plan that is going to act as a template, One particular example that I would like to highlight here is would be about one of the clients that I worked with, where they had a specific communication plan about the structure of how they wanted to send their mails out, specifying the necessities, and uh, highlighting who it was addressing to. So they wanted everyone to be kept on the loop, but they always had that particular group who wanted to be addressed, or who needed to know what was happening in detail. So having these tools really help. Uh, Other than this, I think generic tools like Jira, Miraboard, Confluence, they're also going to be there performing similar duties. It is more in the essence of how we use them to achieve these goals that you just discussed about. Shivani, your thoughts?
I believe like it was so great to know about such consolidated set of frameworks that are coming out of your experiences and learning, and something that any change practitioner can use to better understand and even navigate the change. But after hearing more about these frameworks, this gives me an idea that these frameworks not only provide the structure, rather they are there to bridge the gap between the decision makers and the implementers. And this is definitely creating that sync we that is much needed between the strategy and execution. But because often the real challenge I have experienced in my journey, that it is not about defining the change, but it is ensuring that everyone in the change involved are aligned, connected, and they are all moving in the same direction. And with that being said, we can move to our next part where, yes, as we have covered quite a wide range of topics so far, and as we are moving towards the end of our session, I would like to conclude with my understanding of these concepts. And for that, let's run to our first described Everest journey, where we started with defining the peak, which is, of course, the macro vision. But from a farmer lens, it can be a transformational change. But reaching to that goal will not be possible if we ignore the small and the critical friction points that we face along our way. And I also remember, Harsha, you have mentioned about the maps and the protocols being essential, but of course not enough. And rather, you have mentioned that even the teams needs more clear chain structure and proper support systems to keep moving. And when I've posed that, Shari, you have also emphasized upon how common it is to face resistance, which should not be considered as a roadblock, rather a signal which points towards the gap in trust, awareness, or capabilities among the team. And considering that at this point, instead of pushing the teams, they we should, as a change practitioner, we should rather focus on building confidence, emotional support, and even use the uh, peer group support or change champions, as we have mentioned it a lot during this session. And as it is said, right, the technology alone does not drive the transformation, rather the people adoption does. And finally, to ensure that in this change journey, no one is left behind. The change leaders must be equipped with the right structured frameworks to create alignment and that help them foresee the challenges to achieve the goal. Because at the end, successful change isn't about reaching the top, but it is more about bringing everyone along on the journey. And since we have concluded that, I'll move to our next part, which is the Q&A, and we'll open the floor for questions so that our speakers can address them. Would encourage everyone to add their questions in the Q&A section. We'll wait for another minute. In the meantime, I had this thought running throughout, Shari or Harsha, that
Mhm.
you can help me understand
Uh, mhm,
that
mhm.
how you can actually handle cases where the senior leaders or the users that are not aligned can actually drive their outcomes or the goals at the end.
So I'll jump in and start this one first, and then Harsha, you can give your thoughts.
Mhm.
So I think where you're seeing that senior leaders have one idea and end users have another, it can be a couple things. It can be that sometimes change is coming top down and they aren't necessarily taking a pulse check on what's happening with the end users. When you are at the start of a project and you're seeing this friction, sometimes what is helpful to do is understand the source of the friction and then surface that. Now, I've also seen cases where the leaders are like, too bad, so sad, this is what we're doing. Then, where you can go is that as the project evolves, as things are progressing, then you can start to capture, okay, we are moving towards this vision that you have stated, but here are some of the caveats. Here are some of the things that end users are surfacing. And any large projects, you're typically going to be capturing feedback on a regular cadence. And so you continue to surface this. Yes, we are moving towards what you're asking for, but here are some of the concerns that we're hearing from the users. So that way, we're planting the message, right? We're supporting the end users by surfacing their concerns. We are executing on what it is that senior leaders are asking for, but we're trying to bridge that gap by making sure that it doesn't get lost. If there's no one there that's helping to really bring that message forward, it becomes a vacuum, right? And there's a lot of resentment from end users, and there's a lot of frustration from senior leaders when things aren't working. So it's really just trying to make sure that you're bringing those ideas forward to see where and how you can make pivots. It's also important to highlight where a pivot may be able to help. Something that doesn't completely change it, but can allow you to maybe tweak the trajectory a little bit, but to help you get to a better place. But Harsha, I don't know if you have any other thoughts.
I think the similar question have been posted by almost two, three different people in the queries. Uh, I feel that you need to bring it out unless you bring out your queries, you bring out your doubts, or you voice out your opinions. People are not going to know what you're feeling. You need to voice them out. It's just a case of are you voicing it out at the right place. Uh, with management, they have the broader goals in mind. That is why certain things may look top down. It is also the responsibility of the management to maybe reason with the end users why they are thinking of certain things certain ways. It is always a case where we'll have to meet at the middle. There's all no right, there's no one right way, so you will always have to meet at the middle. Some compromises would have to be made on both sides, but then you cannot expect compromises from just one side, right? Either from the end user or from the management. So you have to be able to come to that middle ground where you are going to say, I'm going to put in so much effort and make these changes, and the management comes halfway down the stairs saying, okay, they're coming here, let's meet here for the moment, we'll take things from there on.
I actually see two related questions in the chat. One is approaching change when not all stakeholders are aligned to the goal. And the other is the best way to drive change if you're the user and you have very little influence or authority on the process, and you don't even necessarily believe that the change should happen. So, kind of in the same vein of what we were just saying, right? When you don't have everybody on board to the goal, I think it's important to surface the why. This comes back to one of the examples that I gave earlier, where we had one group that was just like, not happening, right? You can do a focus group. You can try to understand why and see if there are things you can put in place. Or you can go in and see whether or not everything actually fits within that vision and whether or not you need to make any changes there. And similarly, if you're the end user and you don't really have authority to make the change, you have to go through, you make the case, you work with the project team, you work with your management, and it's not just, I don't want to change because I don't feel like it. It's more, here are the concrete reasons. Here are the things that detract from where it is you think this change is going to go. And you help to drive that forward.
I think it also tie back to what business needs are present, right? So yeah.
I see one more question, and then I know, Shivani, you're going to need to wrap up, but I love this one from David. How have we handled clients who want to selectively use certain change management components? How do you balance supporting the customer while still helping them to understand that by taking an incomplete or disconnected approach, the impact that can have? So it's a great question, because a lot of times we talk to folks and they're like, I got this, I got change management. And when you actually break it down, you realize that there are some pieces that they have, maybe some not so much, right? It's about going through and highlighting for them where change management can help to improve outcomes. So things like, okay, I've seen, we have really great communication and they show these really flashy emails. They show, here are the links to all the training sessions that we have. Okay, where are your metrics of success? You're not going to say it in this way, right? But you're going to pull through some of these other threads, right? How within your organization are you getting the support that you need? How are you doing the pulse check on how things are going? How are you determining what success actually is and what that looks like? How are you mapping out and then and adjusting as you need to? So it's maybe highlighting where some of those friction points are, and then making suggestions of, hey, we're seeing this. Here's some other things that we've seen work too, and I can give you some examples, that kind of thing. So, but Shivani, I know you're going to want to take a minute here to wrap us up as well.
Yes, I believe although you got quite interesting questions in the chat, but unfortunately due to the time limit, we'll not be able to address all today. But we definitely encourage you to reach us out afterwards via the Zifo website, emails, or the LinkedIn. We would love to share and have a continued discussion. The relevant links are posted in the chat as well. And for the last time, I would like to request our audience to answer the feedback question. And this would really help us structure our future sessions. And for that, we'll have just 40 seconds to answer. I think the poll question is up, and I've started the timer. We are closing the polls now. Thanks for your inputs. And before we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to thank each one of you for joining us today. Your time, participation, and engagement truly made this session meaningful. And special thanks to our speakers for sharing their insights, experience, and learnings with us. If you have any further thoughts or questions, feel free to reach us out. We would love to continue this discussion. And Thank you once again. Wishing you all a great success on your change journeys ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, team. Have a good week. Bye.